بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. This is the Tafsir Show, and today inshallah we'll be covering the 29th juz of the Holy Quran, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins with Surah Al-Mulk. But from yesterday we mentioned how there were one or two chapters left, and because the 28th juz covers a depth of different surahs and the themes that they cover, we had Surah At-Talaq and Surah At-Tahrim left over. In Surah At-Talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about divorce, and Allah Azza wa Jal mentions specifically about two things in there. One is taqwa and one is divorce, and we have an interplay between those two ideas as well. One is Allah Azza wa Jal mentions about taqwa, and one whole page or a couple of different ayat, a few different ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about taqwa, that وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ, that person who has taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them a way out, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for them in ways that they could not or did not ever expect to be provided from. And the reason Allah Azza wa Jal mentions taqwa in the same chapter as talaq, or envelopes the discussion of talaq around this discussion of taqwa, is because the matter of talaq is something where taqwa is required. The matter of the spouses is also where taqwa is required. Oftentimes, when a relationship between two people is very deep, very ingrained, very intimate, when that sours, then the consequences or the fallout from that is also, unfortunately, can be very hurtful, very dangerous, and cause a lot of grief from both sides. So if a person is not very close to another person, and then for some reason or the other someone does something, it doesn't hurt so much. But when someone who is close to you, when they say something or when something happens and that relationship sours, unfortunately, then people can say things, do things which maybe they would not have done with another person. And ultimately, the most intimate relations or the most intimate relationship, the closest companion that a person is likely to have in their life for a large portion of their life, is going to be their spouse. And so when a person is married, they're very close to someone, they may go through the highs, incredible, amazing highs of that love, that companionship, that intimate relationship they have with their spouse. And then if that goes to, na'udhu billah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save the Muslim ummah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant barakah in all our marriages. But if that relationship, for some reason or the other, if it breaks apart, if the spouses drift apart, then because of the highs, because of how high that relationship went, the trough, the drop and the fall often or sometimes can be quite deep. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, fear Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, have taqwa, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when this happens, still be just. It might be your spouse. It might be that you feel so betrayed. It might be that you feel so utterly let down by someone who you trusted so much, that you're someone who you love so much, that something like this happened. But still, fear Allah. Still, give those rights. Still, let her go or let him go in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if it does come to this, and yes, indeed, out of the halal things, out of the permissible actions, the most disliked is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talaq, because of the ramifications, because of the consequences, because of the split that happens between two families, and maybe children are left over, and the things that can happen from talaq. But yes, if it does happen, then separate from each other in an amicable way, separate from each other in a way where there is no bad blood, so to speak. That you understand that, we can't get on, maybe we can't, it's best that we leave each other. Then separate, and separate in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still happy. And that only comes about because of taqwa. And Allah Azza wa Jal is referencing that here. And also taqwa is important here because in talaq, again, many a times talaq happens, divorce happens because of anger. And Allah Azza wa Jal is trying to remind us that no, it should not be out of anger that a person gives talaq. It should be through careful consideration, that a person has exhausted all of the avenues available. That first the spouses both sit down together and they try to resolve their differences, they try to reconcile. And then if not that, then they use their family. Then they use people from their family, experienced people, elderly people, and those with knowledge, those with understanding, those with some kind of hikmah, with wisdom. And from both sides, they try to use them. They use them as sort of third-party representatives to try to come together and resolve the issue. And then if that doesn't happen, if that can't solve it, then there's still one more step after that, and that is to go to an experienced Muslim counselor. That can be an imam, that could be someone who, again, is well known within the community for trying to resolve or for being there to resolve those kind of issues. One reaches out, the families reach out to that person and they try to resolve those issues together as well. And only after that, once upon the mashwara of others within the family, upon the mashwara of maybe that counselor, upon the mashwara of different people, and after careful thought and consideration, deliberation, a person might come to the conclusion that maybe, and both parties will come to the conclusion that maybe it is best that they separate, then talaq is given. Talaq is not given in one go. A person does not say 3 talaqs in one go. The most a person should ever say is 1 talaq. And that is a common misconception that people think, that when giving divorce, a person says talaq 3 times. No, a person says talaq once and that's it. And then that separation happens. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us about these ahkam, and it bears mentioning here that for every single person that gets married, it is incredibly important that before they get married, that they attend marriage courses. And once they get married, especially for things like this, it is incredibly important that one goes to an alim and seeks information and seeks knowledge about how to conduct these kind of matters. It's not for someone to simply go and throw these kind of things out. Something as important as this should not be on the spur of the moment. After talaq, Surah At-Talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Surah At-Tahrim, which Surah At-Tahrim literally means prohibition. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers in this surah to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam prohibiting upon himself certain things which were halal. And he did so because he felt that they caused the specific story which is mentioned about the wives of the Prophet ﷺ is a slightly lengthy story, but to boil it down very simply into something very short, was that he thought that by eating a certain food it was causing a bad odor, and he made it haram upon himself. And truly it wasn't that was making the case. It was just that his wives amongst them, they were slightly jealous of one another, and they told Rasulullah about this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah that don't make haram upon yourself those things which are halal upon you. And then Allah Azza wa Jal also reveals what some of the wives were speaking to each other about, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references that in there. Then finally towards the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, save yourselves and your families from Jahannam. This ayah itself is amazing, it's incredible, because it talks about how a person's responsibility first and foremost is to themselves. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازَرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. No person will bear the burden or shoulder the blame of any other person. On the day of Qiyamah, every single person will carry their own good deeds and their own bad deeds. Their books will be opened for them, and they will be asked about themselves. So first and foremost, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Save yourselves from the fire. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ, your families. The first responsibility that the person has before he goes anywhere else is that he saves himself and that he makes tarbiyah of his family, that he brings up his family in such a way that they are also saved, and that the person tries and exerts every kind of effort possible to make sure that his family is saved from the fire of Jahannam. أَلَا كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Listen, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, pay attention. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ, all of you are shepherds. وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ, and all of you will be asked about your flock. And every single person has that responsibility upon themselves for their immediate dependents, that they do their tarbiyah, that they look after them, they bring them up, they give them that upbringing, that education, that one day, inshaAllah, on the day of Qiyamah, they will be together. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that amongst the family, that person, amongst the family and the progeny, that person who has the highest of Jannah, everyone will be brought up to that level of Jannah. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy as well. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to in Surah At-Tahrim. And lastly, just before the surah ends and before the juz ends, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives examples of believing women and disbelieving women. The wife of Lut alayhi salam, and on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example of the wife of Fir'aun. Though on one case you had the wife of a Nabi, and another case you had the wife of one of the greatest oppressors in human history. And where belief came into one and disbelief somehow found its way into the heart of the other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also gives the example of Maryam alayhi salam. These are all examples Allah has given for our women folk, also for us, but for our women folk to take example from, to take heed from, about how Hidayah also is part of them, and also referring to قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ. It's not solely the responsibility of the male in the house and the male in the family to give tarbiyah of the children, to bring up the family. No, it's a two-way street. And it's the responsibility of both. And sometimes, or many a times, the woman might have to take more of a responsibility. The woman might have to somehow push the entire family towards doing good, and especially for the children, because many a times children will depend more and have that connection far more with the mother than with the father, and sometimes the mother has to bring and raise that standard of Islam within the household as well. Then Allah Azza wa Jal goes on to Surah Al-Mulk. Now the 29th juz, we have Surah Al-Mulk, then Surah Qalam, then Surah Haqqa, then from Surah Haqqa we have Surah Al-Ma'arij, and then we have Surah Nuh, Surah Jinn, Surah Muzammil, Surah Mudaththir, and it carries on from Surah Al-Mudaththir. We have Surah Al-Dahr, Surah Qiyamah, and finally Surah Mursalat. All of these different surahs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. Now they come to shorter surahs. All of these will be very short chapters. Many of them might be 2 or 3 pages long, depending on the mushaf that a person is using. And these are surahs that a person can read very easily, and a person should read. They are very nice surahs as well to read. Many of them will be rhyming. Some of them will be ending with meme. Some of them will be ending with إيتا مربوطة الحاقة ما الحاقة وما أدراك ما الحاقة كذب ثمود وعاد بالقارعة. Like that, many of them will سأل سائر بعذاب واقع للكافرين ليس له دافع with عين. Then we have the likes of, for example, Surah Al-Jinn, where the first ruku starts off with قل أوحي إلي أنه استمع نفر من الجن فقالوا إنا سمعنا قرآنا عجبا. Everything ends with with the alif. But most of the ayat at the beginning start with وأنه وأنه وأنه. Again, coming again and again. Surah Muzammil, يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا. Everything ends with alif. And then Surah Mudaththir, يا أيها المدثر قم فأنذر وربك فكبر وثيابك فطهر. Everything ends with Ra. Very beautiful surahs. Amazing in their composition and then in their linguistic style. And also they've been spread about in when they've been revealed as well. So some of those surahs were revealed at the very beginning. So Ya Ayyuhal Muzammil is about that person who is wrapped in a shawl. It's referring to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That when he came back after the revelation, the first revelation, he was frightened. And this also proves the truthfulness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's message, that we know in today's time, science has told us, when a person is in shock, it doesn't matter where they are, the person will feel very, very cold. And one person might see that many a times when we have emergency services that come to a crash or a scene of an accident or the scene of something where something's happened, and you have the victims immediately there. Many a times the ambulance or the paramedics, the workers will come and they'll cover them in a blanket with sort of a foil looking thing on the inside. And that is to relieve them of shock, because they fear that the person may fall into shock. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Jibreel. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had Jibreel alayhi salam come and squeeze him and tell him to read. And this is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is at the top of a mountain in a cave. No one's there. So he is totally afraid. And he comes rushing down. And a person who might have traveled to Mecca will know how far the cave where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, how far that is from where the Kaaba is. It's a considerable walk. It's a considerable distance that a person has to walk. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had that experience, and then he's rushing back to Khadija radiallahu anha, and he's saying, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, Dathiruni, Dathiruni, cover me. And that is because of that shock that he is feeling. And again, this is a sign that Rasulullah was truthful. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then refers to Rasulullah accordingly by saying, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, that oh you who is covered in a shawl, and Ya ayyuhal muddathir, the one who is wrapped in a blanket. So he was wrapped in a shawl and he was also wrapped in a blanket that Rasulullah was wrapped up. The 29th juz starts off with Tabarak alladhi. And Surah Mulk is a surah which a person should recite every single day. Towards the evening, a person should recite Surah Al-Mulk, because we have been told in the hadith of Rasulullah that the surah will come in a form and intercede for a person on the day of Qiyamah. Now, how that happens, in what form it will come, we don't know. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have said so. And amanna wa saddaqna, we believe and we basically affirm. We affirm what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said. And so the surah will come and intercede for its reciter on the day of Qiyamah. And ultimately, what greater benefit, what greater intercession can we have than from the surah and the kalam of Allah Azza wa Jal itself coming and interceding on our behalf. And all that just for something so cheap that a person just recites Surah Al-Mulk in the evening every single day. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this surah. And in this surah there are mentions, or it has three principal aims that it tries to get across. One is that it establishes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness and power over life and death. It gives proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's oneness, and it makes clear the eventual outcome of those people who reject the truth and the people who say that there will be no resurrection, there will be no second coming, there will be no day of Qiyamah, that they will not be one day woken up from their deep slumber, their final slumber, to be awoken and either led towards Jannah or towards Jahannam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references those three principal things in this surah. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. This is praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that lofty is the name of that being in whose hand, in whose control, in whose possession is every ownership, is every kingdom, every dominion. Wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. And then Allah says, Alladhi khalaqa al-mawta wal-hayata, that being who has created death and then life. The ulama, that mufassirin mention, Allah Azza wa Jal says death first and life next. Why? Generally speaking, a person might think that we have hayat first, we have life first, and that is followed by death. But the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this, and every single placement of a word in the Quran is intentional. Every single word, it is intentional. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put something somewhere, when Allah has used a certain word, it is because out of all the different words that He could have used, this is the best way to express the meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to give across. الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created death and then life. Because ultimately the greatest life, or the life that is meaningful, the life that is worth something, is the life to come. And the death that comes immediately before that, that is something. And anything before that is not important. So the life that we are living right now is nothing when it comes to the death that is coming right now, or coming soon, and then the hayat, the life that is coming afterwards. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Allah has created that death that is to come in every single person's life, and the hayat, the life that is to come. The reason being Allah Azza wa Jalla has created this is لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, to test those of you who have the greatest, the best of actions. And Allah chose again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen His words carefully. Allah did not say لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَكْثَرُ عَمَلًا. Allah did not say to test those of you who have the greatest amount of a'mal, that a person quantifies his a'mal, that a person has so much a'mal. No, Allah says لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, who has the best, who has the best. And the point is that a'mal can be many, but if there is no sincerity, a person can have so much. If there is no sincerity on the day of Qiyamah, it will mean nothing. A person can have so much, but if it's not done with conviction, if it is not done with khushu', if it is not done solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the day of Qiyamah, it will be naught. And on the other hand, a person might have done less, but he's done it khalis lillahi ta'ala. He's done it purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on the day of Qiyamah is going to mean something. On the day of Qiyamah, it will weigh down the scales. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the surah, as we mentioned earlier, various different proofs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power and His oneness. And this all comes in this surah. And then we go on to Surah Al-Qalam. And in Surah Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about a man from the Quraysh, Walid bin Mughira. Allah does not reference him directly, but He says about how this person, and Allah Azza wa Jal describes him as an arrogant man and as a person who has come and rejected the truth. And he thinks because of أَنْ كَانَ ذَا مَالٍ وَبَنِينَ, that because of the fact that he has wealth and he has children, he thinks that he can reject the truth. إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ, that when the verses and the ayat are given to him, he says that these are just old stories, they don't mean anything to me. And he is arrogant, he is prideful, he is haughty, he is looking down at other people because of the fact, again, and كَانَ ذَا مَالٍ وَبَنِينَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that because he thinks he has wealth and children, that it will somehow save him. And also this is reference again later on, and it has been referenced before in Tabbat Yada al-Kam, about how Abu Lahab had the same idea as well. And these ayat could really refer to Walid bin Mughira, but again it is open. Allah does not reference a name. It is open. Many people, because they have wealth and children, because they have power in this world, they think that they no longer need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They no longer need na'udhu billah. They no longer need the akhirah. They come to fully believe that they are going to live forever. And we see this with so many people, unfortunately, today, where they've got wealth. They've got enough wealth. They've got enough wealth to last them a lifetime and several lifetimes. People have billions and billions of pounds, and somehow they are still pushing to earn even more. They still can't bring themselves to have that much mercy, that much kindness, but they still want more and more and more. And this is, again, one of the core things about humanity, one of the things about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within every single human being. And it is only when a person has tazkiyah of his nafs that a person can take himself out of that. And Allah gives the example. For these people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the example of Ashabul Jannah, those people of the garden, where their father had a garden and he was fairly wealthy, and he passed away, and his habit was every single year when he would cultivate his crops, when he would reap what he had sown, what he would do is that the poor of the community, the poor of the society would come, and he would first give them some food, give them something from there, then he would take the rest home. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put barakah in there. Now his children, when he passed away, decided that they no longer wanted to continue that sunnah. And so what they decided to do was, they said that next morning when we come to reap what we had sown, what we will do is we'll go so early in the morning that the poor people of the community will not have reached there by then, and we'll take everything, and by the time they come, we won't have to give them anything, and we'll have packed everything away, and there'll be nothing left for them. So they go the next morning, and unfortunately what they find is that there's nothing left. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that night had sent a storm, a wind, destroyed everything. And the point of this example, again, there are so many different things that a person can make. One, first and foremost, is many a times when we go through cost-cutting measures, when a person goes through cost-cutting measures, when a person does a budget, the first thing they will try to cross off is charity. When a company goes through that, the first thing they will try to cross off is charity. But we do not know that many a times it is because of that charity that we even have money in the first place. And when a person crosses off that charity, Allah Azza wa Jal, because of that, maybe reduces their rizq even more. So it is double-fold. They are losing, and where they should have maybe increased their charity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might have given them a change in fortunes, because they cut out that charity, many a times they lose out even more. So sometimes maybe we should think, obviously, a person should make careful and deliberate decisions with their financial selves, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us wealth, and sometimes if we are put into a slightly difficult situation, maybe giving sadaqah, as counterintuitive as it might sound, maybe giving sadaqah is the best way out. The person gives sadaqah, and Rasulullah has mentioned about sadaqah that it removes calamities, that it removes difficulties. So maybe giving sadaqah is the way that a person can take themselves out of that sticky situation. Then from Surah Qalam we go on to Surah Haqqa, which refers to, or Surah Haqqa is mainly about the day of Qiyamah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the surah ayat that reference the giving of the book in the right hand and the giving of the book in the left hand. And these verses are quite scary, quite difficult to read, because a person has that thought in the mind. As they're reading it, the way it's recited and the way it's given is such that it creates an image in the mind of Qiyamah. And at the end of that, the only thing a person can do is really make dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst those people who are given the book in their right hand, and not from amongst those people who are given the book in their left hand. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to Surah Al-Ma'arij, which means the staircase. And the malaika, or the staircase to heaven, is for the malaika. ta'ruju al-malaikatu war-ruhu ilayhi fi yawmin, that they ascend towards the heaven. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to that in Surah Ma'arij. Also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions different things about humanity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about Qiyamah, on the day of Qiyamah, that يبصرونهم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه ومن في الأرض جميعا ثم ينجيه. That on that day of Qiyamah, a person will, the mujrim, the criminal, will try to give in as a ransom anything to try to save himself from Jahannam. He'll try to give his children away, his companions away, his brothers away, everything and anything that he had, a person will try to give away. And also one of the linguistic aspects of Surah Ma'arij is that the end of the ayah, the end of every single ayah changes. So at one point at the beginning, we mentioned this earlier, that it ends with ayn. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع للكافرين ليس له دافع من الله ذي المعارج تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة فاصبر صبرا جميلا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that, then it also changes. So it changes to ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه. Then this comes later on as well in Surah Qiyamah. And in Surah Qiyamah, the amazing thing is, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking in a third person, Allah uses one ending. And then where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes to first person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses another ending. So where in Surah Qiyamah we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions لا أقسم بيوم القيامة ولا أقسم بالنفس اللوامة أيحسب الإنسان أن لن نجمع عظامه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking from his own part in the third person. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that ends with her. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes to فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. Allah is also talking about in the third person, but Allah is now not asking questions. Allah is saying that when فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ, when the eclipse of the moon happens and the eyes go sharp, meaning on the day of Qiyamah a person fully realizes what the situation is. Allah is creating an image of the day of Qiyamah. So on that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to create that image. So because the tone or the subject matter has changed, the end of the ayat has also changed. And then again, it will change again when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts talking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well. So coming back again to Surah Al-Ma'arij, we have mentioned that in there. And then we have Surah Al-Nuh, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Nuh alayhi salam and how his people were destroyed and how he made dua against them, because he felt that no matter what he called to them, no matter how much he called to them, they were not going to accept Islam. And again, Surah Nuh is a very easy surah to understand and to recite. There are ayat in there which really, again, deserve deliberation, but for lack of time we won't be able to go through that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to Surah Al-Jinn as well. In Surah Jinn, Allah Azza wa Jal references certain members of the Jinn who had heard the Quran. They immediately became Muslim, and they went to other jinnat, they went to other of the jinn, and they tried to preach to them about Islam as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala references what they said. What they said, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions all of their dialogue with the other jinns in Surah Al-Jinn as well. And again, it is a very beautiful surah. From then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to Surah Muzammil. In Surah Muzammil, Allah Azza wa Jal is talking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the one who covered himself. And in there's also references to Qiyamah. There's also references to Tahajjud prayer. Salah before the advent of Salah from as we know it today was tahajjud in the night. And Rasulullah used to perform Salah throughout the night, and the Muslims also would perform Salah throughout the night. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla talks about Surah Al-Muddathir, and where Rasulullah was ordered to openly proclaim Islam to the people. And in Surah Al-Muddathir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that, and from Surah Al-Muddathir we'll go on to Surah Al-Qiyamah, and inshallah this is where we will continue on from tomorrow. In Surah Al-Qiyamah there is reference to, as one might guess, Qiyamah and the state of that a person might be on the day of Qiyamah. And inshallah we will continue from here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us every kind of tawfiq, every ability to read the Quran, to understand it, to take the depth of its meaning in, and to be from those people who are the people of the Quran. الَّذِينَ هُمْ أَهْلُ الْقُرْآنِ, and those are the special people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.